Welcome to Breakaway, the OMHA's minor hockey podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Wilbur, founder of the Coaches Site. And as always, I'm joined by Ian Taylor, the executive director of the Ontario Minor Hockey Association. Ian, my man, how we doing?
Awesome, Aaron. Great to see you. We're getting close to the end of the hockey season. We're getting right, and I know we talked about it on our last pod about kids playing right through March break. No one's knocked out early, so having a full experience, and again, not reducing that experience just to get down to two teams. And I know a big part of that is that's part of our player pathways and something we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, I'm excited about today's conversation. We've got Corey McNabb, who I know his title is as the director of NextGen development for Hockey Canada. But I think, to kind of boil it down, I mean, Corey is sort of the gatekeeper is probably the wrong word, but he's the person that takes in just a ton of information, whether it's from Hockey Canada membership, from coaches, from people in his role in other countries, from other sports. Yep. And he kind of filters all that information and then is able to sort of make recommendations to say, hey, here's some things we can be doing to move our game forward. And, one thing I think that we touched on in this conversation, which is really important, is that, listen, I mean, the great thing about hockey, especially when you live in our country, is that it's so ingrained in our culture. Yeah. Everybody has strong opinions. Everybody, is the armchair expert in terms of how we can make it better. And you can make anything better. You can make a ham sandwich better.
Sure.
You can make hockey better. But our game is, from a talent standpoint, man, it's in a really good spot. And I think we touch on that, but I think a lot of that's just from, the work that Corey and his team do in terms of, again, gathering all this information. And I know myself, like you, have had a long-standing relationship with Corey. And the one thing that I appreciate after every conversation with him, you never feel like he considers himself the expert.
Right.
Like he's very much has a beginner's mindset. He's open to every suggestion. He thinks about it. He pauses.
Yep.
And, he definitely does not approach his role from a standpoint of, well, I've been doing this longer, so therefore I got it all figured out,
awesome. that I know it all. Yeah, no, you'll never get that.
He's really curious.
Yeah. Impression from Corey, because I think he's always open, right? And he's always open to not only new ideas, but like how the things that they're trying to implement are resonating. So how was that experience? How did you find this? Okay, there's room to tweak things. Then there's room to assess is there a better way to implement it? Is there a better time frame? Is there a better structure? Which is brilliant. And to your other point, Aaron, about involvement across the world. I mean, you and I have talked a lot about Finland. We were able to spend time there last spring, and one of Corey's peers there, Piru was who hosted us.
Oh boy,
yeah. So I mean, like he's having those conversations all the time, and but I also find Corey has a very distinct like he knows what hockey in Canada is, and also what our strengths are, right? And I don't think whatever. So, I think some people would say, "Well, you guys are always talking about other countries." Well, what about here?
Yeah.
We're not taking away from it. Yeah, no, we're not taking away from anything that's here. And I would say what I think what Corey does a great job of is as you said, he's taking it all in, and he's going to take the best from here, and then layer it on to our history, our passion, our compete, all that stuff that we're, again, inherent, or that we're known for, right? And as you said, the game has never been more skilled, and what kids are doing today has never been more skilled as well, and what coaches are teaching them. So that whole process is just, and the other part, you never arrive, right, Aaron? To your point, right? Like, you're never there. We never, like, this is it.
No.
It's ongoing, right? So that's the other thing I really enjoy about Corey, because I know it's ongoing learning, right? And that's right up our alley.
No, 100%. And you know what? Before we hit record in this conversation, one thing that, and I was kind of teasing him a little bit, but the more I kind of noodled on it, I was like, the idea that like his counterparts in other countries, again, maybe not obviously the USA, but I mean, man, they can, cover their area, their zone. They can basically drive to any coach in their country,
Right.
in a day.
Sure.
Well, Corey, you're looking at like what he's having to organize and to get people in the same. I'm like, man, that's a lift. I mean, I know you. This goes in one ear and out the other. I mean, I admire the role and job that you do so much, because I can appreciate just trying to keep everybody on the same train is really, really challenging. And I'm sure it feels like you're doing a better job on some days than others, but I'm like, man, amplify that across the entire country
Yep.
to try and gain some version of a consensus, man. That's that's a challenge. And I also know I'm not going to sleep tonight because and I won't spoil it for anybody. You'll hear it in the conversation. His stat that he throws out about the NHL draft.
Yeah.
I feel like my ear is pretty close to the ground when it comes to these types of things. That blew my mind. I had never heard that before, but I was like, man, that is there's a lot to unpack on that one. We might have to have a podcast just about that down at a later.
It resonates, right? Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. But listen, again, I think this is the best part about this conversation was that it could have gone on for another 3 hours, and there's lots to talk about. So we may have to investigate the frequency at which Corey joins the show. But again, really, he's a busy guy. He's on the road a ton, but appreciate him joining us. And again, I think all of our listeners out there, you're really going to enjoy this one. So we will be right back with Corey McNabb, the Director of NextGen Development for Hockey Canada. Welcome back. We are pleased to be joined by Corey McNabb, the Director of NextGen Development for Hockey Canada. Corey, how are we doing?
I'm doing great. How about you guys today?
Doing awesome, man. We got lots to dive into, but I thought just to maybe set the table, because I think this will maybe encompass a lot of what we touch on. But Corey, let's say that Ian Taylor writes you an email and says, Corey, every U11 player in Canada needs to learn how to do a backhand toe drag. This is imperative. And you read that and you're like, Ian's absolutely right. We need to make this mandatory across the country. How does a decision like that get made and become implemented through Hockey Canada?
That's a great question. The majority of, I guess, whether you want to call it policies or recommendations, are items that come from member branches, different provinces across the country. And when it populates up from there, it would come to a national level. We have a element called the member forum, and that's where all the provincial organizations get together a couple times a year, and they look at any possible, whether it's rule changes or implementing something like backhand toe drags being mandatory. They have discussion on it, and then they vote. Anything that is basically corresponds to interprovincial play or across all provinces, the members vote on it, and then it comes to Hockey Canada, and it would become policy, basically almost like a rubber stamp from our board. So if there's a specific rule that Ian wanted to put in place from just an OMHA standpoint, they have the ability to do that. Hockey Canada doesn't really get involved in those types of things, but anything that's involved with cross province or across the country nationally. If the members vote for it, and then our Hockey Canada board would basically rubber stamp it, and it goes from there. So it's not people sitting in the office in Hockey Canada saying, "Hey, I want to make everyone learn how to do a backhand toe drag." That doesn't happen. It usually populates up from the provincial level, and then if the provincial members all vote for it, then it would become policy that way.
And I think that's really important to point out because, I mean, effectively what I heard there is that, Hockey Canada is in the listening business and collecting and, feedback from its membership and then serving and electing or at least electing, deciding what is warranted. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's totally fair. There would be maybe the odd thing from a certain level that might come from top down, but it still ultimately is voted on by the provinces. And so when it comes to that standpoint, it's a democratic organization, and I think it's a good way to do it. There's going to be a few things that might be initiated from a Hockey Canada level on down, concussion policy or something like that based on medical research, and it would come down and then it would be supported with evidence and rationale. But for the most part, rules are all in place because of what provincial members want.
So Aaron, Corey would get a lot of emails, just so you know. He would get a lot of emails, and some of those ones are pretty interesting, and he's smiling.
Man.
So
I think we should have like a prop bet on who gets more emails, you or Corey.
Well, I think it would be the type of email. So I think that could be a whole nother podcast, Corey. So yeah. we'll leave that. We'll leave that for another time. So one, I'm a huge fan of Corey, and last time I saw him, he was at the rink just around the corner from my place. He was at the World Junior Camp. It was held here in Oakville, and so I go over to catch a bit of practice, and I see Corey's there, and he's a tough guy to get because he is hands on. So he is on the ice, doing capturing some video, doing some specific skills, and they're capturing that. And so that's one of my reasons I'm such a huge fan of Corey is it's not just the theory. Like there's the theory, there's the philosophy, but then there's the practical side. And I know, one, Corey, you love that. You love that part of how we can capture that stuff and then take that one moment and be able to share it with as many people as possible. I think that might be between, I don't know, skills of gold and up, the whole kind of pathway. You've taken it to another level. So there's Corey, he's on the ice. So I finally get a chance to chat with him, and I'm bugging him, but because he's got stuff to do. And so I think that's somewhere, I think, where hockey is right now, Corey. And what we have things like skill curriculum, and we have the pathways, and the pathways have been have taken on a huge role, especially at the younger age groups. But what should kids learn at what age? How do they build on to each other? But I think the biggest challenge right now is marrying philosophy with how do we implement it practically, because we know kids from this age to this age, we growth development principles, we know growth, like pre-puberty, and then that whole the whole process of development of kids, but the practical implementation is by volunteer coaches, by moms and dads. So that balance, that's what I think, that's a place where I don't want to say we're struggling with, but it might be our biggest challenge right now. So how do you, because you are a hands-on guy, how do you balance those two in I was going to say in anything you do, or maybe it's everything you do. How do you do that? Because that's something, like I say, I think that's something we're struggling with, or trying to find our way. Maybe that's a better way of putting it.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I mean, nowadays with social media and people can go online and find anything they want,
Right.
I find a lot of coaches will tend to move towards sort of structure, system type of play. Tends to be a little bit easier to tell a kid to stand here, do this, go there at this point, versus teaching the technical piece of it. I've always been a big believer that anything we're doing from a Hockey Canada level needs to be practical. You need to be able to implement it, and I think it needs to be, you need to be able to duplicate it. So,
Right.
I coached minor hockey for 15 to 20 years, everything from U18 all the way down to U9. Spent a lot of time with higher levels with our World Junior team, under 18, under 17, pro athletes, different types of things. And I think at the end of the day, a lot of it is very similar. It comes down to giving kids the tools. So teaching them a backhand toe drag. And at U10, you're going to teach it. Are they going to learn it? Yeah. Is it going to be perfect? No. But it's one of the tools you add to their toolbox. And then as they go through the system, to me, your job as a coach to teach them the when, the how, and the why you would do it, when to do it, when it's maybe not the best idea to do it, different things like that. And so I think it comes down to sometimes the game nowadays is overcomplicated. If we teach the kids how to skate, how to pass, how to handle a puck, how to shoot, and we get repetition, and then we start to teach them, okay, here's the situations where you can use this. Here's the times in the game within your team structure that you can use this. I think we're going to be okay. Nowadays, there's so many different elements where kids are going to shooting schools, skating schools, goalie schools, in season, out of season. There's a lot there, and so sometimes I think some of the basics and the fundamentals can be lost. I would also say I'm not necessarily a big biomechanical type of person. Um, not everyone is built the same way, so not everyone skates the same way. There's a lot of people out there trying to teach kids how to skate like Connor McDavid. Well, if you're not built like that, it's not going to be easy. You look at the top 5 players in the NHL, they all skate different. They all shoot different, but they shoot and they skate in a way that works for them. When it comes to skating, to me, it's like skate the game, and let's say, I'm in Alberta. So we look at Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, probably 2 of the best players in the world.
Very different.
They're very different, but they're both successful in their own way. And I think, you look at Austin Matthews, you look at Nathan McKinnon, you look at Sidney Crosby, they're all different, but they're all successful. And so to me, it's more about trying to build on the skills and the abilities that players have and try and build their game around what their skill set is versus trying to sort of fit that, square peg into a round hole, if you will. And so when it comes to development, a lot of things that we do, whether it's, here's some team systems with our World Junior team. We can give that system to a U18 coach or a U17 coach, U15, U13 even. And it's about trying to simplify it. Here's the skills you need to have a good breakout. 9 times out of 10, when a breakout doesn't work, it's not because it was a bad plan. It comes down to execution and understanding, spatial awareness and things like that. So we try to take that type of thing and almost reverse engineer it down and say, if you want to be the next Cale Makar, that's great, but here's all the different elements that he does well, and you need to bring them down and simplify them, from a skating to a passing to, good habits on a puck retrieval, making good first pass, skating the puck, all those types of things. So it's almost, again, to me, as like simplifying and breaking things down. Here's the skills that a defenseman needs on a breakout, whether you're 10 years old or whether you're 18, they're all the same.
Right.
You have to have a good angle to the puck. You have to shoulder check. You have to be able to skate. You have to stick fake, head fake, feet fake, all those types of things. And then you have to make a decision. Am I going to skate? Am I going to pass it? You have to pass it at the right time. And as players go through the system, when they have those fundamental skills, they're just going to get better and better as the game gets more advanced and it gets faster and things like that. So, I think a lot of times for coaches in youth hockey, sometimes they just think it's, they're not simplifying it enough. And just getting down to doing enough repetitions of any one of those areas to get better at. And I even find, I work with a university team here in Calgary too, and sometimes that's a little bit of the mentality of our players is, we're trying to say you need to do these things enough times so you can actually see a difference, so you can translate it from practice into a game. And in today's day and age, just like, kids are all over social media and video games and everything else, um, it it takes some discipline to be able to do something enough times to get enough repetition at it to get better. We've all heard the story of Sidney Crosby a few years ago wanted to work on his backhand. He spent the whole summer working on his backhand shot. He probably took 5,000 backhands.
Right.
We can't get kids to do that nowadays. They get bored after 7 minutes. So, sometimes it's a little bit of a mind shift on those types of things, and make sure we're working on the fundamentals to a point where we're good at it, and then we can add progressions and you can get better. Then you can start implementing it in a game, but it's not going to happen overnight. So, yeah, it is a challenge, Ian, to your point. But at the end of the day, I think if we can simplify things a little bit, work on the fundamentals, make sure the kids are having fun on the ice, they're going to learn. When they see themselves getting better at something, they're going to continue to want to do it. So that's sort of, I guess, the underlying philosophy there.
Yeah. Corey, but can I just piggyback on that, Aaron? Just if I can piggyback on that, so and all of that makes sense. And again, I love like the marrying the philosophy with how we can apply it. It's and again, we're, like you say, we're not cooking something up in a lab that can't be replicated, right? So that's when you said that really struck for me. But at the same time, you've got coaches and parents who think, okay, if everyone else is following the school curriculum for grade 2, and we're going to do that for U10, why don't we start doing the U12 curriculum? Why don't we try and fast forward it? Because then we'll be ahead, right? That whole notion of, like I say, just it's either keeping up with the Joneses or getting ahead of the Joneses. How do we tell people to, kind of touch the brakes a little bit, or like you say, repeat this enough that you're proficient at it? I know, like the introduce, develop, refine kind of progression, right?
Yeah, that's a good point too. I think, the ability to work on the things at this point in time that you need to work on, get enough repetition so that it becomes automatic, is key. And we hear a lot. I get emails, again, hey, my son or daughter is an elite 10-year-old. And I would say, well, I don't really think there's an elite 10-year-old. Right. There's good 10-year-olds maybe compared to other 10-year-olds, but all you got to do is put a 10-year-old up against a 14-year-old, and you're going to see they're, in most 99.9% of cases, they're not elite anymore. And so it's really about building that repetition so that things can become automatic. And, some kids are going to progress faster than others, and some are going to be slower, but really your skill level or your ability at 10 or 12 isn't necessarily going to be a good predictor of where you're going to be when you're 16, 18, 20, 25 years old. And to me, most of the players in any sport who advance, they have a really, really good set of fundamental skills. And then as they progress, they get bigger, they get stronger, they get faster. They have a better ability to translate those fundamental skills into the gameplay. An example I use a lot of times, at 16 years old, Roger Federer wasn't considered the best. But because he wasn't bigger, stronger, faster, didn't serve the ball as hard or hit the ball as hard as some other people, he had to really work on the fundamentals of tennis skills. But then as he grew and developed, he had such a great fundamental core set of skills that he was able to translate that into becoming, the best in the world. And it's like that in multiple sports. We can go around and, Tom Brady was drafted, 212th overall or something like that. He wasn't considered, and probably the latest name, if you're looking at recent, you're looking at Brock Purdy with the 49ers, Mr. Irrelevant, right?
That's right.
Wasn't considered good enough to be ahead of 211 players, but he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league now, especially when you look at tying skills into team play and the ability to win and those types of things. So, for parents and for coaches, I think if you work on the fundamentals, and you develop a position where you're getting enough repetition so it becomes more automatic, then you get into the position where now you can start to think better. And you could, because you're not worried about skating and handling the puck at the same time, you can do that without thinking. Now you're looking for plays, you're looking for space, you're looking for opportunities on the ice. And but it doesn't happen overnight. Like long-term player development is a long-term game plan. It's not an overnight type of thing. And so, throughout all the years that I've been coaching minor hockey, a lot of times the player who was the best at 10 isn't the best at 14 or the best at 18. It's about keeping those kids around long enough so they can develop and see what they can really do. And it's a hard philosophy to get people to act on. When you talk about it, I think a lot of people will nod their heads and they'll agree, yeah, that sounds like it's a good plan.
Sure.
But it's hard with the patients. Their next door neighbors going to this hockey school and this camp and this and that. Well, if we don't go, we're going to get left behind. And it's not really the case. But it's hard to do that. And the majority of parents want the best thing for their son or daughter. They want to support them as much as they can, give them as many opportunities as they can. At the end of the day, we always talk about it. If you go about it the right way, they're probably going to have a better chance. And long-term player development is really about, getting as many kids playing at as high a level as possible for as long as possible. And if we can do that, we're going to see a lot of kids who are going to develop and rise to the top and have an opportunity to play at high levels of hockey.
You know what? I sort of view it this way, guys. And this is just my observations of being involved in youth hockey. It's like if the three of us decided we were going to do the 100-meter dash, we were going to have a race with each other. One of us is going to win. And that doesn't mean any one of us are a great sprinter, but I think sometimes get confused because there's always going to be a best player. You know what I mean? Like just because one of us wins the race between three of us doesn't mean we're destined for the Olympics. It just means that somebody had to finish first. And I think that what happens so often is that people look at their child and they say, just because at a young age they're first, that everybody should be exceptional or that's the criteria. And again, this is just my own observation working with my little guy is that the fundamentals are kind of like, it's kind of like when people go on a diet and they're like, hey, I can't have gluten. And anybody's like, does anybody know what gluten is? And they're like, no, I have no idea what gluten is. Like everybody knows what the fundamentals are, but they don't really know what they are. And I guess you've kind of answered this, Corey, but I just sense that maybe that we have a lack of appreciation for the fundamentals or maybe what they are and what they look like versus maybe some other countries. And I know that, Ian and I spent some time in Finland last year and there just seemed to be, I'd almost call it joy. Like there was just such an appreciation for simple and such an appreciation and joy for teaching the fundamentals. And, I just see so many kids at a really young age that while they're the best player, they can't turn on both edges and nobody's paying attention to that. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, hey, they're going to hit a wall at some point if they don't develop these skills. I don't care how many goals they score when they're 9, if they can't turn on both edges. But like, it's really clear to me, it's right over the head of the parents and probably a lot of the coaches. Like they're just not even watching that. They're just like, well, they're scoring goals, so they're crushing it. So just to clarify, Corey, how do we maybe, outside of getting some pamphlets to put in rinks, how can we maybe build up the equity in those fundamentals and, as you put it, simple?
Well, that's a great point. And Ian mentioned a little bit earlier, we've put together some player pathways at the different levels across the country. And they're really designed about trying to create a more optimal hockey season developmental wise. And so leading into older levels, we have a program called the Gold Medal Pathway, where we take everything that we do with our national men's and women's teams and tech packages, skills drills. We put it into the hands of coaches across the country at, starting probably at a U13 AA level and up. And the fundamental piece of that is player assessment. And I want to differentiate between player selection to pick which kids are going to be on a team. The player assessment piece is evaluating the core fundamental skills in skating, passing, shooting, different things like that, and assessing where a player's strengths and deficiencies are. And it's really identified to be done early in the season. So, basically once you select your team, go through the assessment sessions, and let's really look at what our players are good at and what they're not good at. And that helps to build our seasonal plan or our training plan as to where we need to improve. And as we go around in the spring, we go to a lot of the provincial or the member branch high performance camps. We're working with all of them, and the first 2 or 3 ice sessions are player assessment. We're not picking a team in April, but the kids are signing up, and we're going through this to say we are going to provide an assessment on your skill set. So skating, puck handling, one-on-ones in a corner, one-on-one defensively, one-on-one offensively, blah, blah, blah. And we basically come up with, here's the things we're good at, here's the things we're not. And the drills that we use are really game application, but they do identify weaknesses right away.
Can you give some example of those drills? Because I feel like oftentimes like we run assessment skates, we just maybe don't do the assessing part particularly well, or we don't set ourselves up to leverage it throughout the season. So curious what you mean, what kind of drills would constitute.
So yeah, and here's probably my all-time favorite drill. Ian would be familiar with this. It's a drill called 4-pylon agility. So we put 4 pylons on a circle, and we tell players, I want you to skate around all 4 pylons in any pattern you want, any direction, because we're going to see, can you turn left? Can you turn right? Can you do it equally as well on inside edges, outside edges? Then we add a puck. Now, can you do it with the same speed with a puck on your stick? Then we add a chaser. So now there's someone who's putting pressure on. Can you skate, handle the puck when someone's chasing you, trying to steal the puck? Can you protect it? Can you manage it? Then we get to a point where maybe we add a coach and we add a pass. So now it's a give and go. So you're going to have to put on a couple moves, some deception, some fakes, pass, continue to skate, get open so you can get the pass back. And then to make a game application, we'll take the pylons away because there's no pylons on the ice in a game. So now it's a live one-on-one situation out of a corner. Offensive player has a puck, defensive player is trying to defend. And you can skate anywhere within this sort of designed area. And your job is to try and lose the defender, get the puck to the net. And then the 5th step would be, we would start it off at rim, because that's where, there's so much play that happens along the boards now. So now you have to be able to pick up the rim. And now you have to be able to make plays and use your eyes and vision and scanning and everything. And we kind of look at it at each of those stages. Like some players will be able to do stage 1, 2, and 3 really well. But then all of a sudden, now we got to make a pass with the chaser and there's a coach. Now it breaks down. So that kind of gives us an area of, okay, here's where we need to maybe regress back to and work more on this. Or likewise, we might be able to do all 4 stages well. But if you can't pick up a rim on your forehand or a backhand, nothing else matters because you're not going to have the puck. Now you're going to be on defense. So it's about looking at those types of things. And so in the majority of drills we do, we'll start with just pure technique. Can you transition to the left? Can you transition to the right? Can you turn left, turn right? Then we add a puck. Can you do it equally as well with a puck on your stick? Now, can you do it under pressure? Can you do it and make a pass or receive a pass? Now, can you do it in a game-like situation? And so the assessment piece, to me, it's really, really obvious. And when we do these series of drills, forward specific, D specific, and then we bring things together, angling, a one-on-one angling drill, where you have to incorporate all those things. The deficiencies become really glaring because they're really isolating a certain skill. So in those assessments, we're not working on breakouts because one player on a breakout might not even touch the puck. One defenseman might get it, he might quick up to another guy, he skates out of the zone. So you're not assessing 3 other people in the drill. So everything we do is about the individual assessment, and then from a skill side and then a tactical side. And then you get, the odd thing where there's passing involved and things like that. But, another example would be offensive blue line for looking at offensive skills for defensemen. The first thing you need to be able to do is you need to be able to skate. You need to be able to walk along the blue line, going to your left, going to your right. Then you need to be able to do it with a puck. Then you need to be able to do it with your head up. Then you need to be able to finish it off and shoot and get the puck towards the net. And those are plays that happen in games all the time. You see so many defensemen, they might be good at skating or handling the puck, but they can't get the puck through because they can't shoot with their eyes up. So they're getting blocked or they're not doing things like that. So we really isolate a lot of the skills. And to me, it's something that every single team should do at the start of the year, because it's going to give you as a coach the opportunity to assess where are we at. Here's the things we're good at, so let's keep doing those. But here's the things that we're not good at. And if we spend the time on these, it's really going to pay off as we go through the season and we get into the end of the year when realistically playoffs should be the most important time. And you shouldn't come into the end of the season and say, wow, this kid can't do it. Like, you shouldn't be surprised.
That's a great point. And I just want to build on that, Corey, because you told me back in September about the drill with the 4 cones. We ended up calling it Get Lost. And we progressed to the point, again, this is U7. We progressed to the point where we had the chaser without the puck until literally last week was the first time we added the puck with some of the kids, not all of the kids. And they both had to have the puck. And there was 2 benefits that I think it's just really important to point out. One, from a coaching perspective, when you're changing drills all the time, it's sometimes tough to track progress. So the benefit of sticking within that same framework is it allowed the coaches to not only identify the problem, but now you could give feedback that, Ian's getting better week by week, or last week we talked about this and we can see it. And maybe sometimes we change up the drill constantly because it's easy to feel pressure to do that. You miss that opportunity. And the second part is I think you could sense that the kids, because we went back to it, not every day, but quite frequently, is they could feel themselves getting better. And that gave them confidence, and that made them want to listen more because they could say, hey, I'm going a little bit faster. And maybe, 6-year-olds don't recognize that their hands are in a better position or their feet, but they might just say, I don't know what's going on, but the more I listen to coach, I'm going faster. So I'm going to keep dialing it in. So, yeah, great. Just want to touch on that.
Aaron, you know what the beauty of that is, though? Like, you could run that for your U7 team. You could also run it for your U16 team you were skating with. And it would be, now again, as Corey says, their proficiency, their speed at which they execute would be totally different, obviously. But it's you don't have to come up with some bells and whistles drill. It's still fairly simple. And the practice planner in me loves that you've set this up and you can do 3 or 4 progressions without having to change a bunch of stuff either. So it's just boom, 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 like the simplicity of it is amazing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just a quick point on that. We do that with U7. And a lot of times the kids are giggling, having fun. There's someone's chasing them. What do kids do when someone's chasing them? They're looking over their shoulder. So they're learning scanning to see where the player is.
100%.
And we're not talking about scanning with the 7-year-old, but the fact that they start to do some of these things because we set up a situation where they have to learn it naturally, then it becomes more habitual. I've done that drill with pro players in the summertime. And the first time we did it, I have some guys say, oh, is this like a hockey school drill? I said, just wait. We'll get through the progression on it. And it gets to the point where at the end, and obviously with pros, you can really progress through this quicker. Then they start having fun and they start picking their opponent. Right. So they'll say, hey, Ian, you and me.
Yeah.
And then it's like, hey, I'll bet you $50. I'll bet you $50 you're not going to catch me and steal the puck. And Ian's saying, I'll bet you $50 I can. And the intensity in that, because it's game-like, where the guy's trying to make sure the other guy doesn't steal the puck, the defensive player is really trying to steal the puck, it goes through the roof. And guys start, hey, let's do that 4 pylon drill again, because it's game-like, it's high speed, it's intensity, it's competitive. So it just goes to show that a lot of these things that we're really trying to do are applicable at all ages. Just, there's different stages of it and different stages of proficiency, but they're all game applicable. In a game, when you have the puck, someone on the other team is trying to get it back. In a game, if you don't have the puck, you have to be as good on your skates as the guy who has the puck if you want to catch him and try and steal it back. And so those types of drills always provide a coach with an opportunity, one, to sort of teach or instruct on the offensive side, but also on the defensive side at the same time. And those are, a lot of the drills that we do in the assessment sessions are really about that. It might start off from a technique side, but then to differentiate it, I think it goes to a skill side. So I think there's, skating coaches or goaltending coaches that might be technique coaches. But then to me, there's a differentiator, which is a skill coach, who is, how do you take all these skills in combination and apply them into a game-like situation? So I guess that's sort of some new terminology that we've been working with a little bit more recently here. Is there's technique coaches, and then there's skills coaches, and then we have team coaches or game coaches, right? So, but it's all related.
That's amazing.
How do you? So there's been some changes to the player pathway, and again, I just lived through it. And what's funny, there's a survey that came out last week, and it asked all the family out in Vancouver and the Pacific Coast, said, how did you feel the changes when, in our case, the U7 pathway? And let me tell you, the spectrum of responses from our parent group, where some thought it was way too advanced, some thought it needed to be ramped up even more. Like, it was just such a cross section, and that's not surprising to me. But what I'd like to know, Corey, is how do you, when you make these sort of changes, and in this case, particular to the player pathways, how do you evaluate if it's been successful? And I guess, can you even evaluate that after 1 year? Or did you need a bit more runway to really take stock of that?
That's a good question. I think you can do some initial evaluation or assessment after 1 year. But some of these things will take 2 or 3 or 4 years before you start to see it come to fruition. So it's not unlike cross ice hockey at U7 or half ice hockey at U9. You're not going to see that for 3 or 4 years when you start to see how much better players are at this relative point in time at U12 or U13, for example, on their ability to make decisions quicker, handle the puck in a small space, skate in small spaces, those types of things. So with the pathways, we try to put it more as, here's some guidelines or parameters. So for example, in the past, in a lot of places in Canada, you signed up for hockey, boom, your first skate in September, or depending on where you are when tryouts are, is an official tryout. Well, we don't think that's conducive. And they were always held the first week of school. So there's enough going on in school. It's a first week. You might have new teachers, new classroom, blah, blah, blah. Kids are stressed, parents are stressed. Why would we put them into a hockey situation that very first week where if you screw up tonight, you're going to get cut? So we said, you know what, let's ease the players in. Let's give them 3 or 4 skates. Coaches can run them through a whole series of drills. The kids got new equipment. Maybe they haven't gone to, prep camps or hockey schools ahead of time. It might be their first time back on the ice. So let's level the playing field a little bit. Get the kids comfortable on the ice. Don't worry if you fall down or you lose the puck, whatever. So that was kind of one of the first elements. When you talk to most people from a common sense standpoint, yeah, that makes sense. Why should my son or daughter's first experience in hockey be an official tryout where you put a penny on them with a number and you have these people up in the stands evaluating? The second piece is from the, in the fall, it is about player selection. It's about putting kids on teams where people think they deserve to be based on skill. It shouldn't just be a one and done. You shouldn't just show up one night. Well, you didn't play well tonight. Sorry, you're out. So we've put in place that we're recommending you should have at least 3 tryouts or three skates to show a coach what you can do. Kids might be nervous the first night. They might have an off day. Maybe they had a bad day at school. Who knows what's going on? So let's give them a fair chance to prove that they can make this team. So that's the second element of the pathways. The third one is really trying to put in place development time from the time your team is selected until you start to play. And we see it across the country traditionally. Teams get picked, boom, our league starts next week.
Or early bird tournament.
Yeah. Even coaches who have a philosophy of trying to develop skills in this, they don't have enough time because as soon as your league plays, well, we need to work on D-zone coverage. We need to have a forecheck. We need to work on special teams. And so the development of the fundamental skills is really put on the back burner towards trying to have success early on. So that was kind of the third stage, is providing those coaches with a period of development time before the season starts so you can actually improve your players and get them on the track. The last thing is, the second one is, when we look at playoffs, I don't believe in minor hockey. The playoffs should be a situation where some players are eliminated or they don't make playoffs, and you have other kids that are playing for an extra 6 or 7 or 8 weeks. It's not a level playing field. They should all make playoffs. And let's extend the season so we have more development time at the front, more games and competition at the back. And so to me, a lot of it is common sense. Now, so obviously in some places logistically, it's a challenge with ice time or some different things like that. So, all the different provinces have the ability to make some adaptations based on what they're doing there. But, I'm just a big believer that the pathways are designed to allow for more development. We're not starting the season as early, but we are finishing it later. In the past, we had teams that are done at the end of January or middle of February. Like, it's winter in most places in Canada. Like, what else are you doing? There's no reason to start early just to eliminate a bunch of kids and tell them their season's done when we can have more kids playing later into the season. So that's the underlying philosophy. And obviously we review those every year, a couple of years, and if there's some changes or adaptations that need to be made, we can do that. And again, it's all done with feedback from the
Exactly.
provincial member branches across the country. It's not someone in an office in Calgary saying this is what it's going to be and you all have to follow it. It's always a
Yeah.
democratic process. There's discussion, and then there's I would say some minimum guidelines. So someone can go and say, we want 5 development skates at the start of the year. We want 5 skates for tryouts. We want that. Like, they can strengthen a rule or a policy if they want, but here's sort of the minimum guideline. And so, I think over time it's going to get us to a point where our seasons are more optimal for development. So we have more um, development time at the start of the season, more competition when it should be at the highest intensity at the end of the year. And then by then, a lot of kids are done. They don't feel a need to go and go into spring teams right away and keep going through the year in the summer, because their season has been long enough. Now they may still want to do spring skills, but they have the opportunity. They can play other sports because they've had a good hockey season.
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
hey, Aaron, I was thinking, as Corey's
yeah.
talking about that, picking your team right into competition, no time for development. I mean, heaven forbid you lose your first game or two on top of that, Corey. So now that there's a reactionary, situation that happens because we need a W, right? We need a win. There's the coach feels pressure, parents, scrutinize what's going on. So I can picture that clear as day. Sorry, Aaron.
No, but I like on that same vein, like, so the NFL draft is coming up. I think it's in 8 or 9 weeks. So that's, if you follow football, it's a big chatter, and they have these mock drafts. Well, every couple of weeks, like these pundits that get paid a boatload of money and are not held accountable at all, they come out with these different mock drafts, and so they're clearly gathering new information. And so every couple of weeks, the draft order changes or the picks change. I think it's the same thing in minor hockey. Like, we have to always remember and be mindful of the fact that, like, I know this is true with my group. If we had to pick the teams once a month, the teams would have been entirely different every month. Like,
Right.
that was the jockeying that was going on with these young kids. And all of a sudden, the kid that had to be dragged on the ice kicking and screaming in September, is jumping out of bed at 5 a.m. because they can't wait to get to the rink, and they're working really hard. And there's all these dynamics at play that I think, are, until you live it, you kind of have to experience that to recognize that how important some of these guidelines are. And I would also point out, like, we work really closely with Hockey Minnesota. Their season, like, doesn't start until October. Like, doesn't start. Like, they begin their ramp up in October. Their season ends at the same time, and miraculously, there must be something in the water there, because they per capita put out more professional players than anywhere else in North America. So again, I think that when we're presented with the data, it really supports a lot of these decision makings. But Corey, you touched on spring or summer hockey, and probably I don't know, 10, 15 years ago for sure, I sense that, like, that was a novelty. Now it seems it's like, what, man, I'd love to see the data on. I feel like I bet you it's close to 90% of kids play some form of team hockey in the spring or summer. So I don't know. I don't know if we can put the genie back in the bottle. I don't know if we should put the genie back in the bottle, but I'd be curious to know, Corey, what are your thoughts on maybe some, let's call them best practices, for parents in particular to keep in mind when they're maybe evaluating if this is of value? Because you've touched on it, keeping up with the Joneses. I think for a lot of parents, some do it because they feel like it's important. Some probably do it because they feel like it's what everybody else is doing. They might be letting their kid down if they don't sign them up.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think there's 2 elements to it. And, to touch on your earlier point, there's a kind of a crazy stat that I don't know if a lot of people are familiar with, but if you look at the NHL, the highest percentage of players in the NHL are first round picks. The second highest percentage in the NHL are second round picks. And the third highest percentage of players are players that were undrafted. So
Really?
to your point, There's a lot of
Ian,
teams.
had you heard that before? That's an
No,
amazing stat.
no.
That's a great stat.
There's a lot of teams of paying a lot of scouts a lot of money to determine who's going to be the best player at 18 years old. And there's more undrafted players in the NHL than there are third rounders or fourth rounders or fifth rounders or sixth rounders or seventh rounders. So to me, again, it just goes to show the long-term development effect that, and even at 18 years old, they might say, oh, these guys aren't ready to play, but 22, 23, 24, now they're players. So, again, just, I think, we can do a better job of putting some of that more of that data out there and really showing parents that, what, it's not a sprint. It's a marathon. And, if you do the things the right way, you're always going to come across the outliers, your McDavid and your Bedard or those types of kids, but they're once in a generation type of thing where the majority of players, it's a longer path, and that's okay, because at the end of the day, they're still going to have that potential to get there. So, but yeah, getting back to spring and summer, I think there's value in spring or summer programs where kids can get on the ice in a non-team setting and work on skills, skating, puck handling, shooting, like really get that. If you go on the ice a couple days a week, in the spring for a couple months, and you get to really work on that, and it still gives you the opportunity to play baseball or lacrosse or soccer or other sports, you're still building that physical literacy. And to me, it goes back to that fundamental skill development. I think over the years, spring hockey has really evolved, and now you start seeing tryouts for spring hockey in October of the previous year.
It's absolutely it's batshit crazy what it's turned into. It's nuts.
Yeah, and I fundamentally disagree with that. I just don't think you need to do it. And to me, if you look at where you get better, you really get better during practice. And a lot of the different spring things now, a lot of them are tournaments. Yeah. So you're traveling all over the place. Parents are spending a ton of money on travel and hotel and meals. And if you were to look back at it and say, yeah, you know what, maybe it's fun and the kids enjoy the hotel and they enjoy the water slide and they enjoy competition, but the bang for your buck for the money you spent on the number of shots that they took during those 4 or 5 games over the weekend, or the number of times they had the puck on their stick and the amount of time, the bang for your buck isn't really good if you were to look at it in that light. Yes, there's going to be competition, and some people are going to say, well, this team is higher skilled because we have all these top players from everywhere coming together. But it doesn't necessarily mean improvement for the individual player. You play all these games, and still you're only on the ice. If you have 3 lines, you're only on the ice for a third of the time. The amount of time the puck is on the stick, the amount of shots you get on net, the bang for your buck isn't really there. You could spend far less money and, be in a skills program in the spring, and you're going to get way more shots, way more puck time. There's more development there. So, yeah, I don't know if the genie is going to get back in the bottle. There's an element of it that can be good. Camaraderie and friends get to play with friends, and they, it's kind of cool. But at the end of the day, if you're banking on that to get your kid to the next level, I'm not sure it's there. Someone who maybe just goes in a spring skills program, and they're getting all this repetition. They're working on inside edge, outside edge, backhand, toe drags, whatever it is. They're getting far more repetition. So I think there's a balance there for sure. I'm a big believer that kids should play other sports. One, it's a different social atmosphere. You get to play with different kids or meet different kids. You're working on physical literacy. There's things in soccer, lacrosse, baseball that are going to help you become a better hockey player. Aside from, we're seeing a lot of things now in younger players, overuse injuries, chronic groin problems, sports hernias are starting to happen in younger players because they're doing the same thing over and over. Like skating, 12 months of the year is not conducive to a growing athlete to develop, different muscles and a different range of muscles from a growth and development standpoint. I think some kids get too much of it, and it might be exciting and fun when you're 10, but by the time you're 14, it might seem a bit more of a job now.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, no matter how skilled you are, I think the kids who really are passionate and want it and just want it, are willing to do whatever it takes, they're going to get to the top. You can have a lot of skilled kids, but if they don't want it, then it's going to be different. So my recommendation to parents is find a program that's really about individual development. Make sure that, again, that it's fun. If there's a tournament involved, hey, great, go to one. But my personal thing is I would avoid the types of programs when you're flying all over North America for 5 different tournaments, this and that. I just don't think the bang is there for your buck.
It's just
I just want to add this. Sorry,
yeah,
I just want to add
yeah,
this to and build off Corey's comment. I would
yeah.
also add this to parents. If especially when we're talking like kids who are kind of at the U14 age group, and I see this happening right down to like 7 and 8 year olds, where it's these spring programs that are the super duper elite because nobody started the fun spring hockey yet. They're all super duper elite, but they're cutting kids, and kids know that, hey, like if I don't perform this spring, then I'm going to get chopped and I don't get to play with my pals anymore. That sucks. And I think when we talk about development, like that could be the anchor in development when a kid has to go through something like that. And all they did was try their best. And I think we just have to be really mindful of that. And we don't need to go back to, but Corey, when you talk about like the evaluation skates, I'm also of the mind when it's like U9 and below, kids shouldn't be showing up to the rink thinking there's a tryout. They should
Yeah,
just be showing up
exactly.
to the rink playing hockey and just know that mom and dad or the coaches say, hey, Tommy or Jane, you're going to skate, but in a couple of weeks you're going to be put into some groups and you're going to get
Yeah,
a team name and it's going to be awesome.
yeah, I agree. You're basically doing that to try and group kids of similar skill level together.
Yeah.
And it's not about a B or C or a quadruple A or a triple A or an A. It's about, putting kids in similar skill levels. Makes it easier for the coaches to be able to work when the groups are a little bit closer together skill wise. But then you look at a lot of small communities across this country. The skill level, they maybe only have 1 or 2 teams per age level. The skill level is
Yeah,
huge,
for
but
sure.
there's a lot of real high end players that come out of those communities that down the road that end up playing major junior, end up going to the NHL. And, it was whoever signed up that year for hockey was on the team. So
Yeah.
it's always evolving. I think, I'd also give some credit to some of the people looking at spring and summer programs now where it's maybe not as much competitive trying to ice the best team. Sometimes it's just a group of families who just want a bunch of buddies and they have a similar philosophy. They want to hang out. Hey, we're going to skate a couple times a week and we're going to go to one tournament. So that's kind of there's a lot of different versions of it. My biggest thing for the parents and the family would be, look at all the different options and pick something that you think is going to work for you, but also is the best bang for your buck. Like, at 10 years old, a lot of places you're paying maybe 1,000 or 1,500 for a year. We have parents that are paying 5,000 in expenses and everything for the spring, and it's a lot less ice time. It's maybe the bang for your buck isn't there if you're really looking at a situation where you're trying to put your son or daughter in something where it's really about individual improvement. So
I get anxiety hearing about that with the little one, man. Yeah, we might need to get some new sponsors for this
Oh
show
yeah,
just so I
no,
can
it's it.
keep the train on the tracks there.
It's true, man. It's true. Corey, I think if it's, and maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but if your spring programming looks the same as your in-season winter programming, then that's a bit of a red flag. It. So to your point, you can stay on the ice, but you're working on individual skills. You're working on areas of your game, and and not only are you developing that toolbox, which I think is the best analogy. Fill the toolbox with as many tools as possible and bring them out as you need them in whatever situation. But the big one for me, and I see this with kids, and you're talking about cutting kids, right? Confidence. I think that individual skill developing um, as they improve. Aaron, you mentioned about little guys recognizing I'm better at this. So they're confident. They feel better about themselves. They're going to go into the next year um, feeling that way, as opposed to I got cut from this spring team. My hockey career, which I hear a lot, is over. So I just think if it looks exactly the same as what you're doing already for 25 weeks
Great
a
point.
year,
Yeah.
just it can look different. Or as Corey said, you're putting a slant on it where it's friends, buddies, and then if you're having a great time, you're going to come back. We know that. So there's the other element of it, right? Like, we want to make sure everyone comes back. If you keep getting cut, man, what, like, you would go find something else to do, right? What am I getting out of this? So I think that's crazy. But Corey, I'm gonna take you down another route here. And I'm a football fan, soccer fan. So I read a lot of stuff from and Corey looks at a lot of other sports too. And again, you try and pull what you can and what overlaps. So I'm reading this guy. He's an American, but he lives in Japan, and he coaches soccer. And his philosophy is, football begins at home. So this is what he says. So he says parents are involved in their kids trying things. Obviously, we're the ones that put them in. We sign them up. We take them to the park, whatever the case. But his philosophy is that is all about ball mastery. So I'm gonna be a master of handling the ball before I join a club, right? So he's saying ball mastery before you join a club, and he's saying this is what happens. And in South America or whatever, where a kid would play on the street, play street soccer, but not actually join a team until maybe he's 10 or 11, right? But he has all this time on the ball. So I'm thinking about this. And so he says, I want them, you want them to fall in love with the ball before they fall in love with the sport, right? So that will precede the other. And I'm like, okay, this sounds like early specialization, but it's not. It's basically, just giving an opportunity to basically interact with the ball, but also the parent and the child interacts. Let's get off the TV and let's go into the backyard and kick the soccer ball around, or just roll it on your foot, or whatever. So I'm trying to apply this to hockey. Okay. But in hockey, we have another distinctive skill that's different. So the idea he had is we generally do a lot with our hands, obviously, and you pick things up, you catch things, but with your feet, you're less, walking. That's about it. But so putting your foot on the ball is a entirely different skill. Well, we have skating. So we have skating as a distinct skill, but we also have, you put a stick in your hands and the dexterity required for that. So what comes first? This is my question to you, and I've been waiting to ask you this question. What comes first? Should I fall in love with skating before I fall in love with hockey, or should I fall in love with backhand toe drags before I fall in love with hockey? Do you know what I'm asking?
Yeah, I think it's a great point. Hockey is one of those sports that is a little bit more challenging in that area because, unless you live in an area where you can build that backyard ice rink, you actually
Yeah.
have to go somewhere else to a
Right.
local rink, or maybe you're
Right.
in an area where the weather isn't conducive to it.
Right.
But I think, there's a lot of kids now that still get the plastic stick and the puck, and their first touch with hockey is in the basement whacking that thing around, or
Sure.
similar to golf. You get the plastic golf club and you get the great big ball, so it makes it
Yeah.
easy for kids to hit it. Like, those things are there. To me, that type of stuff, the free play, is when the kids are
Right.
doing it themselves and that their interest. It's not because it's a structured formal program where, the parent says, okay, we're going to skating today, bundle the kids up, go to the rink. Like, it's more of an effort.
Yes.
So, and then you see a lot of young kids will, they're shooting in the driveway or shooting in the backyard just because they want to do it themselves. It wasn't, I don't know the recent stats on this, but in the US, more kids' first experience with skates was on inline versus ice.
Interesting.
And so now, as they would be playing road hockey in their inline skates or in their driveway or different things like that. And then if they lived in an area where hockey, there's more and more kids progressing into the ice hockey world. And, I guess that's probably the Wayne Gretzky effect a little bit in the States when he first went down there. They were opening up all those roller hockey centers where,
Yeah, right.
you could play on your inline. So, but I think there is that element. Um, I think if the young kid is 3 or 4 years old and the parents are watching soccer on TV, they're probably more likely to maybe pick up a soccer ball and do stuff. But if the parents are diehard hockey fans and they're watching NHL or whatever, PWHL nowadays with the Women's Pro League and
Yeah.
things like that, the players are likely to do that. And I think the very first step could just be that plastic stick and puck,
Yes.
where they're just
The mini
whacking it
net.
around.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
no, your parents are taking anything off the tables or the coffee table that can get knocked off and broken because the sticks are all over the place. But those are key elements. And you mentioned South American football. Those kids are playing on dirt fields and roads and whatever.
Yeah.
But they're learning. And you can you go to a skateboard. The parents buy their kids a skateboard at 6 or 7 years old. The parents aren't out there with a clipboard and a whistle trying to
No.
get them how to do it. They go, they fall off, they get back on, they learn a trick, they go to the next one. Like it's all sort of self driven.
And they look at the guy, they look at the other guy going, trying something, right? Like it's a lot of peer learning too, right?
Yeah, and that's where I think some of those extreme sports now have become really popular,
Yeah.
snowboarding and all the different factions of that. Like, when I was a kid, if you did a backflip on your snowmobile, it's because you did something really, really wrong. Now these guys are doing it for fun,
Yeah.
so it's, there's elements to that, because to me, it comes down to almost the joy of the individual to just want to do
Yeah.
it. And it's, I get it's society is different now. It's busy. There's lots going on. But I think if the parents can encourage some of that self-discovery, self-learning, self-development from their kids, they'll really start to see where their interest lies and what they want to do. Some, Bedard is probably the latest one when you look about, how many pucks he used to shoot in the backyard or in the garage or in the driveway. That was just something he was self-motivated to do. If the parents would have come out there and said, okay, every day from 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock after school, you're going to shoot pucks, probably wouldn't have been as interested. But it's something that young kids can really sort of delve into. And if that was more interesting than playing video games or whatever, then that's great. But yeah, I don't think it matters the sport nowadays. It's almost like we want to get into something structured too soon instead of
Yeah.
just let kids play. And I think I remember growing up as a kid, Northern Alberta, after school in the winter is almost like you had discussion whose road was in the best shape for road hockey. And that's where we drug our nets to and stuff
Yeah.
like that. Nowadays, unfortunately, a lot of places you can't even play road hockey anymore because they're kicking you off the streets or the tennis court or wherever. Outdoor rinks don't seem to be as prominent as they used to. Just not as much. The ice doesn't stay in as long or it goes in later, things like that. So some of that free play is definitely lost. So to me, again, it comes down to balance, like with anything else.
Well, and that's where when I was reading about this guy, my first thing was like, is this structured? And I was kind of like, whoa. And then after I read a little more, it was more the free play, what you're talking about, and it was something as simple as putting some of these mini soccer balls in, it would be in the family room or in the basement, and so it, if the kid was just there, it was there with them, and you kind of play around with it, or so you could almost be doing it while you're doing something else. You know what I mean? Rolling the ball on your foot. Well, you could be, I don't know, like you say, whacking that ball or that puck while you're, I don't know, doing something else. But it was the availability to it, or the introduction, as you said, and just the so I don't have to take you somewhere, and we don't have to be there from this time to this time with this instructor. It's just, this is available, or it's in the driveway, or it's in the garage, or it's in the family room. It was just that opening it up, and it could be anything, right? Like I say, like we're talking about hockey, but to your point, it could be anything. Um, I'm yeah. That's, to hear you wrap it up like that into something as simple as free play, makes a ton of sense.
You know what? I had an experience this year, which I think really shines a spotlight on this. So my little guy at daycare, um, it was run by a Ukrainian woman. And so we had a number of Ukrainian families that immigrated to Squamish, where we're from. And so he became really good pals with this young man named Miran. So Miran's
Oh
dad
yeah.
loves football. And, but Miran, they become pals. So they come over to our house. And so he gets introduced to mini sticks. And it's like, so I can hit the ball as hard as I want indoors and I can try and score. And it's like, yeah, this is allowed. So we watched this little guy from literally last spring go from being introduced to hockey, loving it, never had seen a game on TV. I don't think he really understood what the game was, to last May started some skating lessons, like did can skate, to this year, like went down to like the swap and got him like geared up. Skates were a couple sizes too big. And this little guy started like couldn't stand up in September barely. And just, not that it's about the competitive part about getting better than other kids, but he just leapfrogged everybody. But it was all came back to the fact that, to your point about the ball, Ian, like
Yeah.
he just loved this concept that if he worked hard, he'd have more shots to shoot the puck and try, and he was addicted to it. And he just went like this. It was unbelievable, but
Yeah.
it's joy. And I'm like, there's no coaching, there's no nothing. It was just this little guy found so much joy in this pursuit of hitting the ball, and when he got on the ice, the puck, which I think is I think we maybe underappreciate just how valuable that part is, and it probably is the number one ingredient when it comes to development. But Corey, as we close here, so I know it's easy when we get in these conversations, it's easy for us to focus on what's wrong, what's broken, whatever, but here's what I know for sure. When you go to a rink and you watch U11 hockey today, it's unbelievable what these kids can do. Like, it is unbelievable how talented kids are. Coaches are way better now. They just have so much access to information. They're actually focused on developing individual skills. Like, for all the negatives, we're doing a heck of a job. I think that's really important to acknowledge. But fair to say, I think that, you think about this stuff a lot. Like, when you look at hockey, where we're at today, I know a couple of years ago, for example, there was a big push on goaltending. Like, we have to develop better goaltenders in Canada. So we maybe rejigged what that development pathway looked like. What might be the one thing that you say, hey, I think there's room where we could really improve this, because man, this will really improve our our place in the game, or the quality of the game in our country?
Yeah, that's a great question. And for all of us in any sport, it's always easier to kind of pick out the deficiencies or the
For
negatives,
sure.
or, sometimes end up promote the positives. But you're right, the game is in a great place.
Unbelievable.
The things that young kids are doing now weren't even thought of when I was a kid. If someone did a backhand toe drag,
You got benched.
it was by accident.
Or by
It
accident.
wasn't
Yeah,
something that
yeah.
you did on.
Yeah.
It wasn't something that was done on purpose. I would say, as much as the skill in a lot of areas has really drastically improved, I believe there needs to be a lot more emphasis on how to apply that into a game situation in the right time and place. So we see a lot of kids who can, handle the puck in the proverbial phone booth. They can do all kinds of stuff in a small space. But as soon as you get pressure on, or you add stress, sometimes that changes. And so, to me, I think the biggest thing we need to do is learn and I don't know if it's teach, but it's allow kids to figure out the when, the why, and the how to do these things in a game application. So coaches need to set up drills that are game realistic. I think they need to be done on the same place on the ice where they're typically going to happen in a game. The patterns need to be realistic, and then maybe remove some of the structure and the teaching and let players figure it out.
Yeah.
Let them determine, do I turn and cut back here because it's the right play, or am I cutting back because the coach said skate to the corner, cut back, and do this, and this, right? So I think those are some elements that we have to look at. So, overall, I think there has to be game application, and then we need to allow kids to use or develop that hockey sense, the hockey IQ, of when to do certain things, why, how do I incorporate my teammates, how am I going to be able to manage the puck or extend possession or things like that. So, the skill stuff is off the chart, but the game sense, like there's still a lot of players who get to a certain point, and if they can't think, if they can't read and react or make that decision in a split second, the skill doesn't really matter. You have to be able to play. And so I would probably say that's it, is maybe, from a coach's standpoint, to me, it comes down to skills, concepts, habits. If you can give your players the skills, the toolbox, teach them the concept of why could this become beneficial in a game situation, and then it's doing it enough times so those things become habits. So now they can cut back, they can turn, they can do whatever without having to think about it, because that's the play that they see or the read that they make during the drill or during a game. I think that's the next element, is really focusing on that game application of skill, and it's advancing all the time. You see highlights of the night in the NHL is of people. It's like, wow, I can't believe it, they did that. But that's probably not the first time that player did it. They've worked on it in a drill or they've worked on it in practice, and now they finally got to the point to incorporate it into a game situation. So that would be it. I think the game is fun. It's great to watch. There's lots of skill. Sometimes we still try to overstructure kids from a coaching standpoint, trying to get a better outcome from a win-loss standpoint, versus what we really saw these kids starting to work on things in games that we worked on in practice. To me, that's the success. If you worked on it in practice and now you start to see it come into a game, now there's a level of understanding, there's a level of comfort, there's a level of being able to apply what you've learned. And it's no different than music, playing piano and learning the scales properly. Now you have to be able to do that on a stage in front of a whole bunch of people. That's a different story. But if you have your skills, concepts, habits in place, I think everything else will take care of itself. So that would probably be my biggest suggestion is, try not to worry about wins and losses. Just, make sure the kids are having fun, they're developing, and allow them to sort of progress at that pace where they can start to take things you've done in practice and get it into a game situation.
So Aaron,
Right.
one thing. So in our house, uh, the term,
Backhand toe drags.
no, well, yes,
Okay.
but in our house, the term FIO gets used a lot. So FIO is figure it out, and that's a Corey McNabb ism that has transcended hockey and basically covers just a myriad of every topic. So if my son Aiden comes up and asks about this, well, I say to him, FIO, figure it out, and that comes from Corey. So I think that is a skill. In your skills checklist, FIO should be on every coach's skills checklist for sure, because that's where rubber hits the road. So that's one. And then just because we're closing out, you just made me think of something, Corey, because you mentioned earlier picking puck up off the rim and game situations. The other one, this was a few years ago, Corey. We were talking about different ways of starting drills, and the idea was, in practice, you seem to start every drill with a puck on your stick, but in a game, you don't. Right? It's a face-off, or you're jumping on. There's a change during the play. So Corey started doing different drill starts. So a drill start would start off a stick lift, or it would start off you go and pick up the puck as opposed to start with it on your stick. Or you just mentioned rim, which might be the biggest one, considering so much of the game is played, whatever it is, within 6 feet of the boards or whatever. So that's the other one, Aaron. I just wanted to throw out there is that ability. So figure it out is one, FIO, and then the other one is, as Corey said, you're doing those skills in the area that it happens in a game. Well, every drill does not start with you in possession of the puck. Like it's that just doesn't happen. So how are you going to get that puck or initiate that drill to make it game like? So that's the other one I wanted to make sure, Corey, you just made me remember that, and I love that. Those are both awesome.
I'm
Yeah,
just
I think
going to
it's
get a
going to
big
come.
FIO sign in my house, and
I'm telling you,
I'm not even going to
telling you,
forget. I'm just going to point to it.
it'll change your life.
Yeah.
No, and I think that's one way of the differentiation. Like I kind of look at it. If I'm working on technique, then it might not start in a game application
Absolutely,
type thing. But
absolutely.
if I'm in a skill, yeah, I love starting from a face-off alignment. Even if it's just dropping a puck or throwing it to the left or the right, and the player's got to react and go get it. Because there's 40, 50 face-offs in a game. That's where you start. Like you say, you never start with the puck on your stick. So yeah, it's trying to be creative and do things that are game application. Um, you know, Even the warm-ups in practice, the various patterns, I like to work on skills that are going to be used in drills later. I'm not necessarily a big fan of a lot of the drills that start on the 4 blue lines and players are just going like that. I understand the purpose. It's,
Sure.
hey, we're going to get puck touches, we're going to get our feet moving, it's going to be a bit of
Right.
warm-up, blah, blah, blah. But that doesn't happen in a game where a player's standing still on a blue line on the wall and they pass to someone who's, doing whatever pattern it is. So I tend to try and do all those things that are more of a game-like situation, if possible. Sometimes you're going to default back to something as because of a different purpose or whatever. But yeah, I think trying to create those game-like situations is as a coach, it keeps you creative too, trying to think of different things.
Yeah.
So practice isn't just the same all the time. It's not always the same pattern, the same this, the same that. It's break it up, provide the players some working on the same skills, but maybe in a different pattern or a different drill can be beneficial too.
Um, I'm going to close on this, and I think maybe this helps reinforce the point that both of you are trying to make. Have either of you seen the movie Oppenheimer?
I haven't yet. No.
I have not yet
Okay.
either.
Oh my god. Okay. So, anyways, I don't want no. This isn't a spoiler alert. So, obviously, I think we all know the premise of the movie. Robert Oppenheimer helps develop the atomic bomb, but there's a scene in the movie where there's a young Oppenheimer, and he's sort of navigating his way as kind of a gifted physicist, and he's having this conversation with a Danish physicist, Noah Berg, and they're trying to figure out a problem. And Noah Berg in the movie looks at Robert Oppenheimer and says, "Robert, do you feel the music?" And he looks at him. He's like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Do you feel the music? Are you just following a pattern that you've been taught, or can you actually feel what's going on with the numbers in the algebra?" He goes, "You need to be able to feel this." And I think it's just a really good distinction when we're coaching hockey or teaching kids. Anybody can teach a kid to go around patterns. When we talk about, can they feel the game? Can they make decisions? And I think we can all agree that, whether we're nuclear physicists or aspiring hockey players, that helping players develop that feel is instrumental if we're going to unlock their full potential. Corey, this has been awesome. I feel like we could do this just about every week. Maybe some food for thought in the future. Not that you need more reasons to talk about hockey in your role, but thanks so much for joining us and all the work that you do. And again, I really want to stress this, that our game is in a great place. There's always room to get better, but you're certainly a key cog in the wheel to ensure that our kids can all show up and have a great experience and enjoy this great game. Thank you.
Oh, appreciate it. And this is just like we talk about not structuring, our hockey experiences for the kids, coming on podcasts like this where there's not a real agenda. You're just talking hockey. These are fun. An hour and a half goes by like, in the snap of a finger. So it was awesome. I appreciate it. I think it's important to take time sometimes to get back and just kind of, it doesn't have to be structured. It's just, let's talk about hockey. Let's talk about the game. What are the good things? What are the things we can do better? Talk to parents, talk to coaches. What do they need more of? What do they need less of? How do we and do those are important things, I think, as we go forward with the game and in development. Is it doesn't need to be so structured and business-like. Let's get back to sort of the basics of what makes the game so great anyway. And appreciate the opportunity to be on with you guys, and happy to do it anytime.